Hello, everyone. This is another Spotlight edition brought to you by the Tetra Society as part of Connect Together. Again, I am Eric Molendyke, the National Coordinator for Tetra, and being the National Coordinator gives me the privilege to work with this gentleman who I'm going to introduce today, Andrew Jantzen. Andrew is our Regional Coordinator for the Atlantic region. Hello, Andrew.
Hi.
So, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. It's nice and sunny out here in Nova Scotia today. Well, Halifax. So it's a really good day. So yeah, doing well.
You were saying that you were out earlier, so I will try not to keep you too long so that you can get back out there again. But your regional coordinator position is fairly new, so I wanted to. And we always talk about Tetra being a national organization, and of course our head office is in Vancouver. But there's great things going on in the Atlantic provinces. And to truly be a national organization, you have to have that happen, and you're helping facilitate that. So first, Andrew, I'll just ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your background and what brought you to Tetra in the first place.
My background, I guess it's two big areas. One is in the area of technology and engineering and physics. I have a degree in physics, and I play around in electronics. And then the other part is in community development. And I've been working for a number of years in doing like different organizing of workshops and community programs and doing that kind of work. And so to me, working with Tetra is a perfect fit for both of those things. I've been kind of doing one or the other throughout my different work and volunteer involvements. And when I heard about Tetra, I thought that was, just such a great way to bring together all of the different experiences that I've had into something that can grow. So I think I heard about Tetra while I was going back to school in electronics. The goal with that was I wanted to find work like this. That's what I went back to school to do. But like the way that I found out about it was because I needed assistive devices. So I was trying to go to school and I was trying to work, and things were not, I was not set up very well. I did not have the things that I needed to be very successful and productive. So Tetra came up as something that could help me in that sense. And then I kind of thought that would be a neat place to get involved with. So since then I've tried to stay connected, and here I am.
And so when you first heard about Tetra and got connected, I understand you started as a volunteer for the Halifax chapter. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And so for those who don't know, Halifax is a little bit different in that it's somewhat independent. And talk about kind of the members of the Halifax chapter and when we see a chapter, kind of what that means.
So the chapter in Halifax has been here for quite some time. And right now we have a really neat mix of volunteers that have been around for a long time. There's a good group of folks who are retired engineers or mechanics and technologists, that kind of thing. And then we have a number of new volunteers who are young students, people in community. And now we have this group that has this mix, which is really wonderful for seeing how people can find opportunities for mentorship and growth and teamwork in that sense. So we had a really lovely meeting with a bunch of these folks just last week, was it? And even during COVID, it's a great group. It's a great group of people who have passion and energy for building devices and trying to, like, the thing about the chapters is like people are just passionate about what they do. So it doesn't really matter what else is going on. They're going to be there. So the Halifax chapter is like more, I'm not really sure where I was going with that. The Halifax chapter is great.
Yeah. Well, just to touch on a point that you said, because I think it's important. When you said you're still meeting during COVID,
Yeah.
That's a big topic for everybody. How do you stay connected? How do you stay productive? So how are the meetings currently taking place?
Right now, we are having meetings with technology just like this on Zoom. We have had like phone contact with folks and email and through Facebook, that kind of thing. But the way that we can meet as a group has been with Zoom or Skype or that kind of technology. Yeah.
And then at the meeting, is it all volunteers that work on the devices? Who are some of the volunteers that make up the chapter?
So for each chapter, and Halifax included, there's a coordinator who is kind of takes on that role of bringing people together, making sure that things are happening in an organized way, that we're keeping track of different projects, and that volunteers are engaged in what's happening. So the person in Halifax who's doing that, her name is Kirsten. And then from there, we have a couple of different types of volunteers, and some people do all of these things. So it's kind of, sometimes it's an arbitrary divide, but it is helpful. We have a group of people who are very passionate about building projects and have the technical skill sets to do that kind of thing. And then we have volunteers who are really passionate about connecting with people, who do to work in outreach, and that might be working with social media right now by distance, or connecting with other organizations and doing presentations. And then people who are passionate about both those things, and kind of just, it depends on what's going on and what's most passion is lying at that time. But right now, it's, yeah, I guess people are divided between them, and it's about half and half right now. So it's a good mix.
And of course,
There's,
you started out as a volunteer for yourself,
yes,
and then
yeah,
as you
I
said, you
kind
were
of,
going back to school to do this work. So when you saw the chapter, you thought, I can help out with this group.
yeah.
And
And I saw myself as in between there, of having both the technical area and the outreach. So that's something that I really am kind of putting out there for anyone who wants to be involved, is it's kind of what you want. Like, you can be involved in making projects, you can be involved in doing outreach, or any combination of that. There, like, as a volunteer, you can determine what you want that to be in some ways.
mhm. And then, as I introduced you, you currently now are the regional coordinator. So talk a little bit about what your role is, what that means, and for those who don't know, the difference between a regional coordinator, your role, and a chapter coordinator.
Yeah. So as a regional coordinator, I support all the different chapters in my region. So there's I think for 4 different regions across Canada that we've kind of divided our chapters up into. And Atlantic Canada, we've got people in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. Well, we do include PEI and Newfoundland as well. So we have 3 chapters right now in Atlantic Canada. Some regions of Canada have quite a few more, but in Atlantic Canada, that's where we are. And so my job is to basically do whatever I can to help those groups, whether it's with making, like, organizing the volunteer groups and giving them the resources that they need to do that work, or working with community and trying to get project requests and get the word out there about Tetra and what we can offer people. So it's both support of my chapter coordinators as individuals and the groups that they're doing. So that might be help with doing an orientation for new volunteers. That's something that I might support my chapter coordinators with. Or I might go to some of the hospitals in the region and do some presentations and see if I can distribute our info there and either get volunteers involved, or see if there's some people who might need something to be made that can come in, that we can make that happen. like myself when I needed a custom assistive device and was able to get that through my job. I really enjoy being able to do this role in particular because I can see both what someone could do as a volunteer and what someone could do as someone who might need an assistive device, because I've been in both. I've been a volunteer and I've needed something. So as like the regional person, my job is kind of to be able to see from those different perspectives.
Mm-hmm. And just to follow up, what kind of devices have you had yourself? Just to give people an idea of what a Tetra device can be.
Yeah. The way that I think about Tetra devices is often in two different kind of groups. One is in the more like day-to-day activities, and the other one is kind of dreams and goals that are like maybe a fun thing. So the day-to-day things might be, I have different devices that are, something that helps me hold utensils easier so that I can, so that I can eat on my own independently. It might be something that I have to be tilted in my wheelchair here, and I'm constantly having things tip and spill. So it might be something that's adapted for my wheelchair to keep things from moving. Maybe there's a grip surface that we add on there. But it also could be, maybe I really am passionate about playing music, or I really want to go surfing, but there's some kind of barrier keeping me from doing that. Like I used to play guitar, but my hands have gone through a lot of changes and I can't hold a pick in the same way. So a Tetra project could be something created so that I could hold a pick and I could play the guitar again. So it could be both, a day-to-day, like a task that I need in order to live, or it could be something that is just this, like a passion and a goal. Both of those things are where we fit. Yeah.
Okay. And then with your job, of course, sometimes there's presentations. I mean, you and I met when you came all the way into Vancouver, and you're very adaptable at overcoming challenges in daily life and things. And one of our first conversations in you preparing to take on this job and travel all the way to Vancouver was, we were talking about how you travel and deal with that. And for some people, like myself, traveling can cause anxiety, and because we're leaving our chair, which is like an extension of our body. And I really respect your opinion on a number of topics, traveling included. So I was wondering, when you have to travel or get on an airplane, how do you deal with that or try and protect your chair? And what would you say are some valuable tips?
Mhm. Yeah, traveling definitely also makes me nervous. I've had my wheelchair damaged more times than I care to have it happen.
Yes.
Pretty much every time there's something that happens. But the thing in that is, yeah, I've learned a lot in the process about things that I can do to help make that go a little smoother. And it tends to be a lot of pre-planning. I go through this whole lengthy process before I travel, that I have lists of different items that I need to bring along with me. Like key is having bubble wrap, elastic bands, zip ties, and tape. Also garbage bags. So there's some supplies. I have a supply set that I have in mind. It's like duct tape, right? Like somebody might think duct tape is the thing that you use to magically repair anything. But in terms of wheelchairs, it might be different. I might actually need zip ties. I might actually need like bubble wrap. Bubble wrap is great because chairs are durable in some ways, but there's also stuff that can break. So there's some very simple supplies that I like to prepare with. I also like to have like a more formal looking thing that tells people what they have to do with my chair, because they seem to take it serious when you have something more formal. So I'll have like the step-by-step laminated instructions that it'll come with, and a big sign that says how much money my chair cost. When people see that it costs $30,000, sometimes they are a little bit more careful. Sometimes not, but I find that it's like I have to prepare people with enough information, but not enough to overload them. And it's a very fine balance. It doesn't always work very well. And it definitely didn't the first few times. I am getting better. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is just to kind of think through, like, how am I going to make this easy for somebody else who has no experience with a wheelchair? How am I going to translate what I know about this into something that's going to make sense if somebody had never done this before? So like the first time I did it, I sat down with a friend and said, here's how I would explain it to you. Does that make sense? Or are you confused? What would you need? What would you need as a stranger to my chair in order to do this? And that was very helpful. That was how I made my list, and how I made my list of things to do and my list of supplies was just by kind of talking it through like that with other people.
Yeah, well, that all sounds like great ideas. I'm making my own mental list. Zip ties, garbage bags, clear instructions, and bubble wrap.
Yep.
Yeah, all things to lessen the chances. And then, of course, as well in your job, you're out and you're connected now. You're well connected in your community. Talk about some of the other groups that you work with, support, that kind of feed into your job with Tetra.
So some of that includes some of the groups within the health system, different within the IWK here in Halifax and the QE2, different groups of OTs and rec therapists and groups that work with different communities of people, I suppose. In the IWK, it's the children and youth area, and we do a lot of projects in that area. So that's a great connection. Then also more in the community side of things, there's organizations like Neil Squire, which again is a national group, so we have connections with them elsewhere too. But Halifax here, we connect quite a bit. There's also right now we're planning an event during National Accessibility Week, which is being put together by Reachability, and Reachability is quite active, especially during COVID, actually, for different communities of people with disabilities here. There's March of Dimes and the Canadian Paraplegic Association. And then off of that, there's a lot of groups that we connect with too that are not only for people with disabilities, they're broader, but people who like to have resources that are relevant to all the different types of people that they might come across. So maybe it's a women's organization, but there are women with disabilities, so that's a good connection for us too. Halifax is like the disability community. We are somewhat connected, but it's happened actually during COVID. It feels like we're more connected for some reason. I've been finding that there's some different groups that have been formed, and I hear a lot more from independent living and a few of the groups that have started doing frontline support programs for folks with disabilities. So it's as soon as you're online talking with these different types of programs and services, it's very easy out here to stay connected right now. I'm finding, at least, people want the information. They want to be connected, and you just put the word out and it spreads pretty quickly.
And that's great to hear you say that you feel people are getting more connected. Why do you think that is? Is it because people have to work harder to find the time to try and get together, or just people reaching out for that human interaction?
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be different for different people. For myself, I think isolation is a thing that's somewhat familiar to me on a regular basis, not just during COVID. And for some reason, it seems like right now more people are understanding or trying to understand or having to understand that experience. And all of a sudden, I am getting a lot more people in general trying to connect because they realize that everybody is in this situation. Everybody's isolated. And so it just seems in general that there's a lot more people who are trying to reach out because they know that other people might need that connection. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like, it might not be that I'm reaching out a lot, but people who I'm connected with are doing it as well. Yeah, not really sure how to explain it. I just think that people are wanting the connection. And so they're just putting the word out there and going from there. I think that COVID-19 has shifted things in a way that like brings out a lot of the issues that are happening, but it's also helped us kind of see what we can do collectively. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And talking about connecting and working on things, what are some of the exciting things that is going on? We'll start with the Halifax chapter, and then maybe mention something exciting in the region.
Mm-hmm. With the Halifax chapter, I mean, right now, it's just really great to see that we've shifted from our way of meeting in person and having that in front of you personal connection to figuring out how to work by distance. And I'm really proud of the chapter for being able to shift and do that. So like they're hosting online meetings every month right now, and putting the word out there and doing some actually some recruiting of new volunteers, and they're getting them on board and doing some of those mentorship opportunities. And then connecting with community, we have an info session coming up on June 3rd that anyone is welcome to attend. And that's one thing that is happening there. And there's one other event that's happening that is escaping me, the details of it. But there's just a few more opportunities for like partnering and like especially on online forums. Sorry, I'm blanking a little bit on that other one, but there's definitely that one event that's coming up next week, and a few that I'm just working with the chapters to solidify details on.
Okay, and then is there anything else that you would want to say? What do you see what's an exciting thing in the future? What do you think is the potential for the region? What are some goals that you think is a possibility, that you think is achievable? Let's say maybe by the end of this year.
It's an interesting question. Partially, I think because things have shifted with COVID, like coming into this, thinking about the region, the hope and some of the goals are being able to reach more areas. Like before, we were thinking of being able to start some chapters in, either at different schools or in different provinces that we're not as much in yet. And there are some neat connections that are happening that were kind of signs that there was some energy to do that. The interesting thing right now is that because of COVID, we're not as separated geographically anymore in the same way. Like, because we're doing everything online, those lines of borders are not as firm. So that to me actually is a neat thing to think about, is how can we as Atlantic Canada continue to grow, even if we don't have set geographic, like we don't necessarily need to start a defined chapter in one area when we could find ways to expand by distance and online. Yeah. And there's some opportunities in PEI that I think they're really neat coming up. And there's some folks from Dalhousie that have been working with us on trying to make some more connections there. and also at NSCC actually. So there's a few school connections that I'm really curious to see how that happens in the fall as we move forward.
All sounds great. When you say interesting connections, and I just would want to be, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask or clarify, students can also be volunteers, correct?
Yes, definitely. We do have right now people who are at Dalhousie who are involved with Tetra right now. And I was at NSCC when I started my involvement with Tetra. So that one, and there's someone who is who will be going back to NSCC that has expressed interest in helping us reach that audience too. So yeah, there's some direct connections with students and with faculty at some of the schools that are able to help, connect with maybe some classes to see if there's students who want to work on projects that are either more advanced or different areas that we don't have necessarily in our volunteer group yet. So it might allow us to do more, I don't know, tricky, complicated, creative projects, and that is very neat to me.
And I just want to, for everybody who may be listening, again, if you are in the Atlantic region, anywhere at all, Andrew is your point of contact. So if somebody's curious about Newfoundland or the potential of starting something in PEI or Charlottetown or Halifax or Fredericton, Andrew's the point of contact, and he will help put you in touch with either volunteers or discuss with you about your project. I know in group meetings, Andrew's a great problem solver. So if you are listening and you know of somebody in the Atlantic region, or you're watching and joining us from the Atlantic region, and you think, how can I get help? Anything in that region, Andrew can help problem solve or put you in touch with the right people.
Yeah, definitely. I am more than happy to help connect people in whatever way. Whatever way you want, whatever way makes the most sense.
Well, Andrew, it's been great to have you in this role. I believe you are closing in almost. It'll be here before we know it on a 1-year anniversary, and it's been great to work with you over this 1 year. I guess my last question, because you mentioned COVID a couple of times, and people may be interested. How is COVID affected the community of Halifax? And you talked a little bit earlier about isolation, and how do you feel that COVID has really affected? You can just talk for yourself or other people with disabilities that you may know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it for myself, it's had a pretty big impact on the services that I need to access, whether that's home care or services within the hospitals, like modifying my wheelchair and making adjustments. That's one of the biggest things, is that there's a total lack of the services and supports for, not that all people with disabilities need them from the health system, but just that they are very much not there right now. And that makes the day-to-day life that I, trying to manage a little bit more difficult. And I'm finding that that's also being reflected by other people that I know too, where we're having challenges with, like, whether it's, maybe you can't find the right supplies because the businesses and services that used to be there, they're not open right now. But you need them. You can't really go without some of these key health things. Or I broke some of my splints the other day, and I can't get them replaced because nothing is available right now. So that's a pretty big barrier. The other one is just in general with the responses to COVID, that in a lot of the responses from government or from like larger places, not that they're not necessarily doing it intentionally, but folks with disabilities are often not included in a very active sense. Like starting off with some of the the programs here in Nova Scotia. A lot of the programs for people with disabilities were canceled, and that can make sense because they're protecting people that might be more at risk, and it's definitely important to not gather in groups and all those kinds of things. But it took away some vital employment programs and recreation programs and that kind of thing, which makes isolation much more challenging when you don't have those regular things that were important for providing connection to other people, things to maintain, whether it's physical or mental or emotional health and well-being. Like, those things are not here in the same way. And so it makes things a little bit more challenging, which is why it's been so important to still have the community organizations that work with folks with disabilities still here, because they're still active, a lot of them are, and they're still active online, even if they're like the actual physical place themselves is not. And that is helpful. Like, there are conversations in places that you can go and just meet with other people online, even though that other stuff is missing. So yeah, it's significantly changed how I can manage and how other people can. There's I'm going to be taking part in a panel on that topic too, where there's a few other perspectives they're going to bring in, talking about folks living with homelessness, and that also, like, the connection with disability there, and a few other areas like that, trying to just like have a conversation about generally how has this impacted all the different communities of people with disabilities too. So, like, I have one experience, but it's definitely not everything. And I'm really looking forward to this panel coming up on June 1st here in Halifax. And just to be able to hear more from other people too, because yeah, it's so important to include the diversity of experiences that we're all having.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time and talking on a variety of different topics. You're a busy guy, and as I said, I have to let you go and get out in the sun when you can. So thank you so much. Again, Andrew Jantzen, Regional Coordinator for the Atlantic Region, and he will be keeping us up to date on the great things happening throughout his area. And thank you again, Andrew, so much for your time. It's been great to give everybody an overview of your experiences and things that are going on in Halifax. And thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
You too. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great. Thanks.